Welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio, the number one podcast for IT executives seeking insights on the impact and opportunities for innovation that automation is delivering to businesses around the world. Featuring thought leaders in AI, machine learning, orchestration, security automation, and the future of work. And now, on with the show. Welcome, everyone. My name is Guy Nadivi, and I'm the host of Intelligent Automation Radio. Our guest on today's episode is Mark Campbell, Chief Innovation Officer of Trace3, an emerging technology consulting firm based out of Irvine, California. As Mark's LinkedIn profile states, he specializes in, quote, squeezing the hype out of emerging tech, end quote, thanks to his work in the venture and startup ecosystems to identify emerging enterprise IT technologies and innovation trends and introduce these to customers, partners, and the industry. Mark and his team review over 1,000 tech startups each year, and he's also a frequent speaker and presenter on innovation. So we've invited him to come on our show to help us squeeze the hype out of such technologies as automation, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. Mark, welcome to Intelligent Automation Radio.
Well, thanks for having me, Guy. Greatly appreciate it.
Mark, as a Chief Innovation Officer, you have an interesting definition of innovation involving something called, quote, positive deviance, end quote. Can you elaborate on that a bit and how you incorporate it into your definition of innovation?
Sure. We get that question quite a bit from customers, especially customers starting up their own innovation group or tackling an innovation project or trying to inject a emerging technology into existing a business model. The term positive deviance, I'd love to claim credit for it. It is so smart, but it was actually invented by a guy by the name of Dr. Jeff DeGraff out of the University of Michigan. And in all of the very wordy and academic definitions that I've encountered over the years, I do think that Dr. DeGraff has distilled this down into two words, the real essence of what it means to innovate, positive deviance, both sides of that. So kind of the idea there being that for every innovation, regardless of industry, technology, outcome, or pitfalls you're trying to avoid, it means that you have to deviate from the status quo. You have to kind of overcome your own internal business inertia, your own internal processes, your own internal way of doing business, your own internal technical skills. That deviation, of course, can take many different forms. Not all of them are beneficial. Sometimes deviation for the sake of deviation has gotten companies into trouble. Certainly New Coke is a terrific example of that. But positive deviation, where you're kind of taking a look at this perfect future that you're aiming for, and what sort of deviations are going to be the ones that give you the greatest probability of gain and the greatest probability of avoiding the pitfalls that comes from deviating from your current business models. I think smart automation is certainly one of those examples that we are seeing in the market today. Where automation is a terrific and wonderful thing that is helping us, if you will, streamline the status quo. But when we talk about smart automation, we are really talking about deviating from that. And so I think that's a very good example of how positive deviance, an example of anyway, how we're seeing it applied in our customer base.
You've talked about there being three key drivers of innovation: fear, honor, and interest. How should IT professionals factor those key drivers into their decision-making when considering moving forward with a potential enterprise innovation?
Well, I think before even jumping into an innovation project or looking for innovation targets or forming an innovation team, I do think the executive sponsor of an innovative initiative needs to take a look at these three core values, right? This fear, honor, and interest. If you prefer a little bit more modern terms, you can say fear, pride, and greed. This was a pattern discovered by a Greek researcher, about 2,400 years ago by the name of Thucydides. Now, at the time, of course, he was trying to figure a more effective way of killing Spartans, but nonetheless, it actually applies very apropos today. When we take a look at this deviance, we're going to deviate. It does require us to evaluate the fear of staying where we are and having our competition beat us versus the fear of changing, or potentially the pride and honor of damaging our brand with a failed innovation initiative, or increasing our leadership, our industry prowess by creating a new innovative and disruptive product that changes our whole marketplace. And I think like when we get looking at the interest or the greed or what's in it for us side, certainly there is a danger in releasing new innovation projects by displacing existing revenue streams or existing products or existing customer bases. And that has to be balanced against the potential upside of a new line of business, a new market, a new expansion, a new threat to bring against your competitors. I think innovation leaders, right at the very get-go, when they're starting to contemplate using innovation as a weapon, need to balance that, right? What do we fear more? Where's the greater honor, and what's in our best interest? Doing this or not doing this?
Mark, let's talk about AI and machine learning. Please tell our listeners where you would squeeze the hype out of these emerging technologies.
Well, certainly AI has had a long and roller coastered history going back to the 40s and 50s. And in that period, we've seen kind of this ebb and flow of various techniques and technologies that are enabling AI to tackle harder and harder problems. However, when we take a look at a lot of products hitting the market, we trifurcate these into three buckets. We call them the simple, the savvy, and the smart. Simple being just regular procedural type algorithms, whether that's a Excel spreadsheet or an autopilot on an airplane. And then there are savvy products. These are those that have embedded knowledge bases or access to expert systems. Of course, they were very popular in the late 80s and 90s, but really they embody the knowledge of whoever created the product. And then we get into the last of the three buckets, the smart bucket. And this is where solutions really learn. They take and ingest data, discover patterns, discover behaviors, maybe they discover baselines and report on anomalies from that baseline. Nonetheless, they are smart, they do learn, and they do adapt. So when we look at this AI space, we are seeing hype being introduced by simple and savvy products out there that are having their marketing department inject terms like deep learning or machine learning or AI or convolutional networks or reinforcement learning or what have you, to where their AI actually exists in their marketing department, not in their engineering department. That disconnect there can be very confusing for our customers who see a great story, they hear a great speech, they may even see a good canned demo, but looking under the hood a little bit, there really isn't AI there. This is just AI washing a savvy or even worse, simple product. There are some techniques that we discuss with our customers on how to make that differentiation. One of the core truths about AI, as we mentioned, is that it learns. It's smart. And that learning is based upon a lot of data. So a technique that we talk to our customers about is dig into that. When you're evaluating a product and you want to really make sure that it is a smart product, not just a savvy product, talk about the learning. How was this trained? How does it learn? Is it delivered in a pre-trained fashion, or does it continue to learn after I install it in my environment? What data is being used for the learning? How much data is required? Is it canned data? Is it publicly available data? Or is it my proprietary data? Digging into that layer of it when you're confronting a potential smart solution, if the product out there does not truly incorporate any learning or any AI, you're going to get very evasive answers. Well, that's a trade secret. Or, well, that's a lot of smarts that our guys in the back room have injected into the product. Or, well, I'm not really able to go into that. I'd have to shoot you. And if you keep pressing on that and get these evasive answers, you should kind of flag that as something really to be concerned about. On the flip side, if you talk to a true AI company and you ask them, well, how does your product learn? What kind of data? Can I use my data? What happens after I install it? How do I re-baseline? You're going to see them light up. The analogy I use is like sitting next to a grandmother on the airplane and you ask, do you have any grandkids? If they don't, they're going to tell you, shut up and don't be that guy. And you're going to get a silent plane trip for the rest of the way. If in fact they are a grandmother, you're soon going to see see Josh's kindergarten play. You're going to see a photo album. You're going to see the birthday card that they got them last year, and you're going to have a very, very conversation-filled journey. The very same is true with an AI product. If it truly has AI, digging into that is going to just open up a whole world to the point that you almost don't care what the answer is. But that enthusiasm and that passion that you see coming from the vendor, you can make a safe bet that you're on the right path.
What about automation? Where does the hype need to be squeezed out there?
Well, right now we're seeing a ton of automation products come to market. Certainly what we talked about before about separating the savvy from the smart, equally true on automation products, especially those touting to be smart automation. So those all hold true. The other point of hype that we do see quite a bit in automation is the promise that this is going to be a single click and your problems are solved. Certainly from a technology point of view, there are some great advancements out there. Certainly there are a lot of techniques and products that truly will, in a smart way, automate your business processes or your internal development life cycle or what have you. The one thing, however, that is very often glossed over is the technology part's the easy part. The cultural part is where things get a bit difficult, and these kind of happen on three levels. On a personal level, you do have people that maybe fear that automation is going to displace them, or at least displace some of the skills they've garnered over the years. At an organizational level, when you start talking about automating techniques within your group, there also is going to be a little bit of dissonance. Typically, organizations have well-worn processes. They have rules of thumb. And certainly, if the automation is truly smart, it may suggest ways of doing things that are not part of the playbook, so to speak. And that causes some organizational tension. The other thing that tends to happen at a corporate level is sometimes automation isn't isolated into one particular team. Typically, when you're automating, especially business processes, these start to leak over into other business units, other parts of the organization, and the cultural, political, and personal ramifications of that, unless they're addressed right up front in a project, even if the technology is perfect and flawless out of the box, these are some potential pitfalls that await any enterprise that decides to handle the people problem later.
What are you seeing as some of the most interesting innovations right now around automation, AI, and machine learning?
Well, we have a distinct advantage in that we're partnered up with a few dozen of the world's top tier venture capital firms. So we do get an opportunity to see a lot of products when they are at the proverbial two guys in a PowerPoint stage and watch them mature. Now, by the way, there's a ton of infant mortality, and a lot of these companies don't ever see the light of day. Nonetheless, when we start watching these, as you mentioned earlier, we do have the opportunity to take a look at thousands of startups a year. You do start to see patterns forming. And certainly when we look at areas that the venture community right now is spending a lot of attention on, certainly the AI ops, applying AI to IT operations, smart SecOps, this is applying AI into security operations. Those two are huge right now. There is such a large market out there, and there is such a dearth of products to satisfy that market, that there are some very good products coming to market right now that solve a myriad of problems. But one other area is robotic process automation. We are seeing, as you've probably noticed, there are several products on the market that have IPO'd, and their IPOs are enjoying a terrific ride right now. But that's echoed in our customer base when we go and talk about robotic process automation, whether it's actually workflow automation, whether it's screen automation, smart chat bots, call center interactions. Across the board, we are seeing a big interest right now from our customers to bring those processes under automation, and if you're going to go through all of that, smart automation. So it's not just about business process management or business process automation anymore. We are kind of seeing this let's say, the maturation of the use cases that are being solved, with AI now allowing all three of those, AI ops, smart sec ops, and robotic process automation, to baseline and report on anomalies. Sometimes this is called behavior analytics, to actually correlate, especially in the security space where you have thousands of alarms, to correlate those down into clumps, and then for each clump determine a root cause. We're also seeing smart automation being used to not just react or control existing situations, but to actually make predictive alerting on things that could be going wrong, or bottlenecks that may be appearing, or issues that may manifest themselves further on down the line. And at the very hairy edge in the automation space, and this is a little bit controversial right now, certainly in the security space, is automated remediation. So if we are being attacked, or we do have a storage array that goes offline, or we do have a workflow that all of a sudden halts, do we want automation to jump in and automatically remediate that? And of course, the answer is it depends. Certainly, if it's a low level, we have someone from accounting that can't get in because their password is jammed up. Certainly, stepping in automatically and remediating that and resetting their password, probably not that big of a deal. But taking an auto manufacturer's assembly line offline, that's a fairly financially onerous decision to make. I think over time that'll move, but that's certainly the areas we're seeing investment being made in today.
I understand you're doing a lot of exploratory research on quantum computing right now. How do you think quantum computing will disrupt automation, AI, and machine learning for IT in the future?
Well, it's still a little bit nascent, but we do have customers that are spending time and money evaluating quantum. Right now, the two hot areas are quantum computing, which includes quantum computing as a service. So instead of buying a quantum computer, just renting time on an existing one. That's one big area. The other area is quantum encryption, and so that certainly leaks over into the security side of the house. But these are still in development. There are some great systems out there. There are real products that you can buy today. There are open source projects that can be implemented today. And the main targets that these are approaching, one is optimization problems. These are your typical traveling salesman, flow dynamics, scheduling, and network optimization, not necessarily physical networks, but even human and social network optimization. Quantum is quite effective at solving optimization problems, even the primitive machines we have available to us today. So certainly when we take a look at automation, and we're talking about automating a workflow, today what we're doing is we're actually automating heuristics in a general sense on large scale processes and flows. It isn't mathematically possible to come up on a digital computer with all of the combinations and select the best. However, with a quantum computer, that does appear to be a very solvable problem. As I mentioned, we do have small and primitive systems today, but even on medium-sized problems, that is becoming a little bit more of a reality today. So this idea that quantum computers, in the optimization space at least, will be able to replace the heuristics being used in automation, that definitely is a fairly likely outcome. The other area is AI training. You certainly can look at the training of an AI system as a non-deterministic and even probabilistic activity, that once an AI system is trained, you're not truly guaranteed that that was the optimal training. It just works with the training data that we've presented it with so far. There are, the term being bandied around right now is quantum intelligence, to where you can actually use a quantum system to take, again, today relatively small AI networks and come up with the optimal training that is out there with a fairly high confidence. As these quantum computing systems mature and incorporate more and more qubits, the sample space of data is going to increase. The amount of solution space that you're able to address is also going to increase. I think that's going to have a direct impact on smart automation, both on the automation side and the smart side of that.
Is there a single metric other than ROI perhaps that will cause you to recommend a particular innovation to your customers and partners over others?
Well, I think when we take a look at our customers, the one thing, especially in the emerging technology space, that's a big fear is this going to be around tomorrow? If we implement this really cutting edge solution from a bunch of smart folks that have their own little startup, what's the story going to be in 6 months? Are they able to keep up that trajectory? Are they still going to be around? And it really breaks down into this what is that product sales pipeline. Sometimes that's a bit hard to measure, and how innovative is that solution? Is it the right type of innovation for the right time, for the right problem? And how is the market responding to it? Now, I know that I cheated a little bit and gave you three answers to that, but if you roll all of those up, it's what we call momentum. When we take a look at a startup, certainly there's a ton of other ancillary attributes that a startup has to have, like smart and experienced leadership, a great product suite, some good early results from their alphas and betas. But if you want to boil down one thing, it's very easy to go look if a top tier VC has already funded them. Now, if they're on to their B or C round funding, that typically means that they've convinced at least 2 or 3 top VCs to do their funding. And one of the key attributes VCs look at before they write the big checks is exactly this momentum area. If you don't have access to funding data from VCs, there are a handful of emerging tech research companies out there that attempt at least to combine these. One example would be CB Insights. They put together something called the Mosaic Score, which is composed of the market strength that they're targeting, the momentum they're seeing in that, and how much money they've garnered and how far have they burnt through it. So there are metrics out there, but it all hinges around this momentum idea.
Mark, what can CIOs, CTOs, and other IT executives start doing right now to prepare for the innovations you think will be the biggest disruptors to IT in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and certainly one that we get brought in to deal with. And I think every customer realizes their market, their business, their culture, their skills, their budget are all very unique and shape that. But if I was to condense those down, I would actually put things into 2 buckets. The first bucket is what I would call defensive IT. This is using emerging technology to shore up your IT assets. Said another way, from a business point of view, this is to do cost reductions, efficiencies, to where the business isn't worried necessarily about the money they're pumping into their IT infrastructure and the return that they're getting from this. Typically, defensive IT helps buoy up those ilities, availability, scalability, agility, portability, maintainability, a lot of those non-functional type requirements. These are what we kind of call defensive IT. We've seen a ton of great innovations come on the defensive side. Certainly things like containers or cloud, AI, where it's allowing us to do more with the budgets we have, or in some cases even less budget. So being that defensive side, making sure that you're doing the tried and true as best and efficiently as possible and increasing those ilities, I think that's job one. However, if you've gotten to the point where your business has progressed by that, and I do mean the entire enterprise, has progressed from viewing IT as just a cost center and therefore the least cost, the better, now we start getting into offensive IT. And this is where IT starts getting a seat at the table for business decisions. We have an expression at Trace3 where we say all possibilities lay in technology. And we truly believe that. There are a ton of business problems out there, a ton of competition problems, a ton of market problems, some regulatory problems, some skill sets problems, some budgetary problems that companies face. And we believe that there is a solution in technology for each one of those. The IT organization that consistently finds those, fields those, and brings in business benefit from those is going to be asked for a seat at the table. They're going to be part of the thought leadership at the company, especially as it relates to lines of business. So not just the goodies that sit inside of the data center, but the actual lines of business and revenue streams and P&Ls of the company. That internal thought leadership, of course, is much easier said than done. And there's an awful lot of trust that has to be built. There's a little bit of risk-taking that needs to be built. And just like we said before, a great evaluation of fear, honor, and interest need to go into that.
Offensive versus defensive IT. That's a phrase I think is really going to resonate with the sports-minded CIOs out there.
Well, there's a bunch of them. I totally agree.
All right. Looks like that's all the time we have for on this episode of Intelligent Automation Radio. Mark, it's been great having you on the show to squeeze some hype out of the emerging technologies we hear so much about these days. Thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, Guy. And I'm certainly looking forward to your upcoming podcast topics. I think this is a terrific and fertile ground to plow.
Mark Campbell, Chief Innovation Officer of Trace3, an emerging technology consulting firm based out of Irvine, California. Thank you for listening, everyone. And remember, don't hesitate. Automate. Thank you so much for listening today. Please subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. We publish new shows regularly, and you won't want to miss one. And please remember to give us a rating. It helps others find the show. Intelligent Automation Radio is sponsored by Ayehu, the leader in intelligent automation solutions for IT and cybersecurity. You can get more information about Ayehu by visiting our website at ayehu.com. That's AYEHU.com. Ayehu, creating the successful path to the self-driving enterprise.